a quick introduction, but welcome. So firstly, very grateful to Squash NZ for allowing us to use their content in this e-training session. So Daniel and his team, thank you very much for that. Why I thought Squash NZ would be a good client or take a look at was not only is it lovely looking content, it's engaging, and there are some subtle design changes or elements that Nevin has used in creating the content. But also I wanted to perhaps focus a little bit on how Squash NZ helped us design the content really. Squash NZ had a very well planned and well structured element to how they built their focus for their people. And what do I mean by that? They had a really good understanding of who their target market was and what they wanted to present to that target market, but also how they wanted to present it. They had a very good internal feedback process, which also helped us. It was very short and sweet in terms of quick improvements or advances in the content that they wanted to see, which also helped Nevin and how we built that content. So that's just a general look at why the Squash NZ, but I suppose from your perspective, you're keen to see perhaps those subtle changes in how Nevin built the content, and that's always good to carry out some refreshing on your content. And we, like you, are also always learning, perhaps more Nevin in the content build side of things, but we are always learning about how to and what to do to engage our clients. So look, without any further talk from me, I will pass over to Nevin. He's the expert, and we'll just take a look at how he's built the Squash. We'll take you through a couple of the Squash slides, and Nevin's going to take you a little bit further in terms of what he's doing with other clients as well. Nevin, over to you.
Thank you. So I'll just share my screen here with everyone. And hopefully you can all see that okay. Let me know if you can't. So this is one of the Squash NZ models that we did. And I'm just going to flick through some of the pages and we'll see some of the stuff they did. So there's a lot of imagery used, particularly in the backgrounds. A few other things to make fonts stand out and stuff like that. And then some of these, some drag and drop interactions that are maybe a wee bit different looking than the standard thing. But the main thing is that there is a lot of imagery, and particularly imagery that takes up full backgrounds, as we'll see here, and a couple more slides. There's a big one. That sort of thing. Yeah, and that was something that they wanted. They wanted to be able to show a lot of imagery, not just black text on white slides, which there's nothing really wrong with, but just to make it a little bit different. And yeah, just to make things stand out a bit more, and to use some of the images that they had that they provided to us. So what I thought I'd do was explain what I've done with using the images, one big sort of not to do, and then a few ways around that and a few things to do. So I've created this other module over here. And this is an obvious not to do, and I've used a really bad example of an image on purpose. But the problem with using background images really is that because they can be quite busy, it makes it really hard to read text when it's over the top of it, as you can see. And they don't really have to be that busy to make it difficult to read the text, but unless you've got a lot of negative space, it can be quite difficult. So that's the issue, and I'll take you through a few different ways to overcome that. So the best solution is the use of negative space. So in this example, it's obviously all the sky up here. Sky's really good, water a lot of the time, and some other things you can find that's just a blank wall or something like that, where it just doesn't have any busyness that's going to get in the way of the text. the other key really is that you need to make your text readable, you need to have contrast with whatever the background is. So I've done white text on this example because white on that blue is easy to read, whereas a dark grey or black might not be as easy to read. So that's a really good one, if you can get images like that. And a lot of the time you can't. So some ways around using a background image, if you can't find one with negative space, put a wash over the background. So this is just a regular background image, and I've just put a big square over the top. It's a white square with an opacity. And you can still see that this isn't, maybe the contrast isn't perfect, but it's a lot better than it would be if I hadn't done that, you know, and it was more like that one. So that's a light wash, and that's dark wash. Obviously, if you use a dark wash, you're probably going to want to make your text light. If you want to use a light wash, you're going to make your text dark. So I'll just show you how to do that. I'll create a new page. And I'll just go back to this page. I'll just copy this text just to use it as an example and paste it onto this page. You won't be able to see it yet because it's white. And let's say that I've got a background image. I think that's the one I've used. And you can see that text is quite difficult to read at the moment. So what I want to do, I've already decided, let's say that I want the text to be white, but I can't really read it. So I'm going to have to make the background darker in order to read the light text, but I still want to be able to see the image. So I'll hit my Add tab. I'll choose Shape and make a square. I'll just drag that square up into the top corner and make it fill the entire space, that 950 by 600 pixels. And now I want to change the color of it. So I'll go to my cell style. I don't want it to have a border, so I'll just make the width none for the border. And for the fill, I want it to be black, but I don't want it to be 100% black. So I'm going to use this slider here to change the opacity, and you can see this alpha number changes as I do that. So a good starting point is sort of, I usually say around 40%. And then I'll change it from there. So it's actually out of order at the moment. So I'll just put that square behind the text, and we'll see if that's much easier to read. And then I'll just kind of play around with that background color, just making it darker or lighter until I find what works best with what makes it easy to read the text and still allows you to see the image well enough. So that's basically that, pretty simple. Does anyone have any questions on that? No? Okay, good. So some other ways to use images, and some probably more obvious ways to use images, to just put a large slice of an image over to the side. They look really good if you make them the full height or the full width, rather than a square with a margin around it, as I've done here. Other things to note, you want to keep, you know, your margin around your text. Keep a good margin around your text, not just the top and the left, but also on the right and the bottom, or between the image and where the text box ends. You might have noticed when we looked at that squash example before, they had angled images. And that's a wee bit more tricky, but basically you would need to make an angled image with like a PNG, so it's got a transparent part to the image. And you probably need some software to allow you to do that. Really, I use InDesign, and you probably don't want to pay for InDesign just to make your images. But squares or straight angled images are easy to use and easy to create. And you can just move them. This one is actually a full image. It's the same image I used in the first example, and I've put a white square over the top. to make it appear like the image is just taking up that space there. So you can do that too if you don't have a cropped image. And then other examples of how to use imagery are the isolated images. I like to use that a lot if you can find them. And I like to sit them sort of so that they're getting cut off slightly at the side, almost like they're poking out of the side of the module. Yeah, and that's it. So the background images, one is quite good with the wash over the top. One thing I'll just mention there as well is that you don't have to use an opacity on a black or white square like I've shown here. And you don't have to use black or white text, but blacks and whites are very easy to work with. You can do, any color you want really. You just want to get that contrast with the text in the background right, and you'll probably know if it's going to look nice when you see it really. If I were to change this background from a black to, I'll just choose randomly this blue here and change the opacity, you'll get something like that, which may or may not suit as well. But I have used colors in the past as well to do this sort of thing. And it really just depends on the color and what you're trying to achieve. So what the squash examples also have was background images used with interactions. So here's a few more examples of that, and there's a couple of the examples from squash in this as well. This one, obviously background image and a big square over the top with no opacity. This example has an opacity in the square, so you can see the background coming through, but not too much. And then we've got this one, which is a drag and drop. That's kind of similar to the other one. I'll just preview that for you. And here we're getting into the type of drag and drop interactions that we used with squash, where they're a little bit different than the standard. So you can't really see that this is a drag and drop as you're probably familiar with them. There's no grey box to drag the items into, but there are actually drag boxes just sitting here in the answers. Here's an example from squash, and this is a wee bit different. There are the grey boxes here, but they look slightly different. There's this arrow pointing up and part of the answer sitting to the side. And that's with one answer per drag box. This example has several answers per drag box. And you can see that those are still easy to read everything that's on the screen, but still using a big background image. So what I thought I'd do here is just reverse engineer one of these drag and drop interactions, as in the whole thing with the angles and the text and everything like that, and talk you through what I did there. So I'll create another new blank page, and I'll just jump back and forth between a couple of pages, and we'll talk through what I'm doing. So the first step obviously is that you're going to want to add an interaction, drag and drop, and it's going to give you your default grey box and a couple of options. I'll just make one of them, but let's say that there's just a couple of answers here and they're both correct. Go back into that and make the max items 2 so that I can drag both of those answers into the box and out of 2. And I'm going to hide the question text, which by default sits within the drag box. So now you've got your basic drag and drop interaction. So if we look over here, what we want to do is create the answer, if you like, above it, a triangle, and this background shadow. So once you work out your size of all your drag items and you want them to be all the same size, and you want them, want them to be the same size, and the width of them and the height of them will be equal to the largest item. So if the largest item needs to be 200 wide by 30 high to fit the text in, then that's what you want them all to be. I'm just going to jump in here, and I'm also going to change the feedback icon to sit on the target. And what that will do will mean that the feedback won't be on the individual answers, it will sit with the drag box. So I've decided that these are going to be 200 wide by 30 high. There's 2 of them. So that's going to be 200 high by 60, 200 wide by 60 high. So I'll make my drag box slightly larger than that. So 210 by, it can be as high as you want. I'm just going to make it 100 high. And if I preview that, we'll see that these fit nicely within that box without jumping over the sides. So the next step there is that if I preview that again, you might notice, it might be a bit hard to see on your screen, but there is a border around those items. If I go back to this one, you can see that the border is a slightly different color. So what you want to do really is to make the border color the same as the target. By default it is, but over here, I think I might have changed the target color. So if you change the target color, the background color, so we make that something a bit lighter, then I'll also want to make the border color here lighter as well. Make it the same color as I used just before. Not the background color, the border color. And that'll mean that when I drag them onto the box, I won't see borders around everything. Next step, we want to put a bit of a question above it, and we want that to be in a color. So the easiest way to do that is either you can make a cell and you can change the background color of the cell with your text in that cell, or you can just make a shape and then have a cell with the text in a different cell. So I'll just make one cell. I know it's going to be 200 wide, 210 wide rather, equal to the width of that box there. I'll just type in my question text. I'm going to make that bold to make it stand out a wee bit, and I'm going to center align it. And I want that to be a color, so I'll just pick this color here. The text doesn't look all that great in that color on there, so I'm just going to change the text color to white as well. Make that a bit bigger, and I kind of want this to sit in the middle, this text, so I'm going to choose my line, go to my line space, not my line spacing. What am I trying to do? Don't worry about that. So we just want that to sit sort of above there, so that the bottom of that cell sits right at the top of the drag and drop. And then the next step is to add a shape to make that little triangle. So I'll choose triangle. I'm going to choose the same color as I used just before, and I'm going to use this. I'm going to drag, holding on to that little icon so that the triangle is pointing down. I'm going to place that at the base of the cell, make it the same width, and I'm going to make it not as high. So that makes that wee triangle there. Now, one issue that see now is that if I were to use the drag and drop interaction, the first item is going to sit over the top of that triangle. So I actually want this drag and drop interaction to start a bit further down, but I don't want that gap to be there. So I'm going to add in a shape. I'm going to make it the same width as everything else, and I'm going to change the cell color to match the drag box. And I'm going to go to my layers, and I'm going to put that rectangle. And now I've got that gap there between where the drag starts and where the angle, the drag target is, starts down here. So I'll just move that up a wee bit. Probably want it to start where the point of the triangle sits. So the only other thing over here is that these have a shadow. To see the shadow working, you really want a background image. So I'll just quickly add a background image. We'll use the same one I used before. Just change that layering so that it's at the back. And I will also add a wash over the top of it so that we can see things easily. Just like I did before, change that to black and change the opacity. Quite dark this time, and then change the layering again so that rectangle sits in between all the items and that image. It being a dark background, that's made that text very difficult to read, so I'm just going to change the text color on those to white. And then is on light with dark text. And change the cell color to white. You should put that shadow in there. So all that shadow really is another shape, and those wash. It's a dark wash with the opacity at probably around 30 or 40%. Want to be the same size as you. But I want it to be offset by, say, 10 pixels. So change that layering, drag the rectangle to the back, but in front of the image and the wash. And there you go. And if we look at the original example over here, that's looking pretty maybe what start the drag maybe down a bit. That's basically it. If I preview that now, it's probably looking pretty close. And I think these ones over here do sit in the center. So this requires a wee bit of coding. So what you'll do, hopefully this works, is you go into code, which we can tell you later, and this may or may not, so I won't tell you what I'm doing until it does work. No, it hasn't worked. It's not going to work at all, is it? Oh yeah, there we go. I'm a bit far away from the screen, so there we go, it's better. So all I've done here is I've put a triangle bracket, type the word center, C-E-N-T-E-R, on one side, close that triangle bracket, and then on the other side, triangle bracket / center, C-E-N-T-E-R, and close that bracket, and that changes the alignment, puts that text in the center. And that's basically it. You might want to play around with your size a wee bit here. So these are 200, while this is 210. If I make these 210, hopefully that sits in the very center. I can see that that's going slightly off to the side. So what I'll do in that case is probably add a bit of padding, rather add a bit of width to the border of each item, and that should sort that out. You also need to add a colour to the border to make that happen. So you can see I've added a wee bit of a border there. I'm going to have to do it to the other items as well. Just adding 2 pixels of border. Might be a wee bit off here, but you get the idea, and then eventually you'll be able to drag those without them jumping off to the side, and they'll still sit in the center. You might need to play around with your borders a wee bit, make them a bit thicker or not quite so thick for all your different items. Or probably easier just to make these slightly smaller. You can also play around with your padding and things like that to shift things slightly over to the side if you feel like they're not quite in the center. I mean, it's only going to be a couple of pixels off anyway. I think it's only a couple of pixels off, but I'm a bit fussy about things like that, so I tend to muck around with this sort of thing for quite a bit of time to make sure it's absolutely perfect. But anyway, you get the idea there. So that's kind of a way just to make your drag and drops look a bit more interesting than just your standard, here's a grey box in the corner and just your items sitting off to the side and dragging them in. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Will they work as mobile friendly modules?
No. To make them mobile friendly, what you would have to do is you'd have to grab everything here, put it into a group so that they'd be stuck together on the mobile, and then that tends to make things shrink on the screen, especially for drag and drops. So I tend to avoid using drag and drops on the mobile anyway, and you'll see that the majority of platforms don't use drag and drops for mobile. They're very difficult to get to work well and look nice at the same time.
So I guess the Squash New Zealand ones aren't mobile friendly then?
No, they're not. No, if you're going to make, for mobile friendly authoring, you really have to keep things quite simple because they do that stacking and items, just background images and things like that. You could put a background image on a desktop and then make your modules mobile friendly. What that would do would be put the background image at the very top of everything, and then other things would sit below it, stacked below it. And so you would just need to keep that in mind that, what are the colors of my fonts and things like that. If I've put a white font on a background, when it's on the mobile, that white font's going to sit below that image, so I won't be able to read it because it'll be on a white background. So best to keep things simple, just because you've got so many items. And yeah, it's almost easier to start from mobile if you're authoring for mobile friendly. Make sure that works well, and then it probably will look all right on the desktop. But make it mobile first and start from that starting point, then see what you can do with it afterwards. Make sure it works there first, then try some different things, rather than try to make something look nice on the desktop and then try to force that to do the same sort of thing on the mobile.
Cool, thanks.
All right.
Yeah, Nevin Murray here. Thanks so much for that. Two things for me that were greatly useful. One is the fact that you've recorded this. I can't keep up with that stuff, to be honest. So when you send through the recording, it'll give me time to digest it and be able to apply some of the things. The second thing, I've been fart-arsing around with images and using the edit function to change opacity and light and what have you, whereas what you've shown us, pulling in a box and using it that way, just seems so much more simple. So thanks for that. That's really cool.
No worries. Yeah, like I was saying before, you don't have to stick with your black and white. So if you're just changing the opacity of an image, it's going to make it lighter, probably, but you can make it darker by using a shape over the top, or you can add a slight color change to it. Yeah, I mean, even just a subtle color change can make things look a lot more warmer, if that was your goal. That sort of stuff. So it doesn't need to be that your intention is to put text over the top of your image. You can just slightly change the look of the image, and it can be sitting there by itself, like we've seen with some of these images here. I could put a wash over the top of that one, even though I don't need to put text over the top, and just slightly change the look of the image by adding some color to it or making it darker or lighter. Anything else? All right.
So no other questions. Thanks, Nevin, for introducing us to some new way, perhaps refresh some content. And as Murray alerted to, this will be up on our website over the next few hours. So please go and take a look if you need to. Other than that, if you need some help with what Nevin's shown us, or perhaps some ideas in authoring, just give us a yell and we can perhaps catch up on a Zoom and take you through a one-on-one session. So more than happy to do that as well.
Hey, Richard, just before you leave, I was just picking up on that question about the authoring for mobile. Have we done a session on mobile-friendly authoring? I'm just wondering for a future one of these e-trainings, if the group here can give us some feedback, whether that might be useful to do.
Yeah, good question, Graham. I don't think we have done a specific, so perhaps it's something we should look at.
Certainly for our business, please.
Oh, well, if there's nothing else, we'll let you go back to your busy day. Enjoy your day, and thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Nevin. Thanks, Richard.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya. Thanks so much.